So they're 3.5-point favorites, and it is paramount. We've talked about it now for the last 3 years, how paramount it is for the Bengals to get going early. Everyone in the world knows that the Bengals like to start slow. And if you look ahead, if you look past just this week, they get the week 1 win against the Cleveland Browns. They got another game where they're going to be favored by more than a field goal, which is a pretty good margin in the NFL. You look at the next 4, even 5 weeks, and the Bengals might not be favored in a single one of those games. Stone, go ahead and flash the graphic up when you get a chance. But the Bengals they'll go to Minnesota next week after they play Jacksonville. They'll go to Denver. They'll take on the number 1 seed from the NFC last year, the Detroit Lions. Then they'll go to who some people say are the best team in football, the Green Bay Packers. And then they bring home Pittsburgh Steelers the week after that. So their next 5 games, you'll be lucky to go 3-2 out of. You'll be lucky, especially the next 4 games, you'll be lucky to get 2 wins out of that. So it is so paramount for the Cincinnati Bengals to get a win this week, because if you don't, you go into that 4-game stretch at 1-1. You could be coming out of week 6 looking at 2-4. You could be looking out of week 6 at, even 1-5, which then you just chalk up the season and you whisper it goodbye. If you win this game, it doesn't matter. Obviously, you got to win a game. You got to win 2 games, even 3 games to keep everything you want to keep ahead. But you're able to get through this next 4-game stretch after this week if you're able to win this. And you're able to keep your season alive, because the Bengals have come out of a deficit in previous years to obviously make the postseason or at least be in competition at the end of the year. And then once again, at the end of the year, there's 3 games that the Bengals should win. So if you look at the middle part of the schedule, it's crunch time in that middle part, and they just got to get a win this week, I think. I think that's where I'm at.
I think you're overvaluing some of these teams. We do this every single year in the NFL. We take the previous history of what they've been and the last year, and we assume that they're going to be a good team, and then all of a sudden, they don't have nearly as good of a year. The Detroit Lions, again, I'm not here to suspect or act like they're not going to be a serviceable team. They are. Are they as good of a team as they were last year? I don't think so. I think they lost a lot of pieces, and
they lost both coordinators, which obviously is a big thing.
You brought up how big of a role do coaches play, and do you think how much value do they actually have? Listen, I do think that when you lose, both of your coordinators, it's going to, if nothing else, you can convince me it's going to take some time to get back on track. So you have a home game against them. I'd like to think that you more or less would be favored against the Lions. I could be wrong, but I'd like to think that you would be. At Denver, I get it. It's at Mile High. But it's a primetime game, right?
Monday Night Football.
I think that also bodes well, in my opinion, when you have to travel somewhere, because you have a little bit of extra time. You also have a situation where I just think that the stakes are raised a little bit. And maybe I'm crazy for thinking this, but if you had to go to Denver and play a 1:00 game, or what is a proverbial 1:00 game out there? I think it's a 4 o'clock game here. But the reality is that it just kind of like mixed in with the rest of the NFL. Maybe you could convince me that it's a little bit more of a difficult game. But you give Joe Burrow, you give that offense a chance to shine on Monday Night Football, I think it's a little bit of a different story. So I like to think, that's a pick 'em. I could be completely wrong on that. You keep saying 2-4. I think 500 at minimum is very realistic. I know that's only
if they get through this week and those next 4 games or next 5 games that they'd play after that, 4 of the 5 are against teams that were playoff teams a year ago.
Right.
And the only team that didn't make the postseason looks like one of the best teams in the league, and that's the Green Bay Packers. So that's where it's just to be in a playoff team in the NFL, you're going to have to beat good teams. That's just you can't just coast through the league. You're not going to get a favorable schedule more often than not. You're going to play tough teams, and you're going to have to beat tough teams. And if the Bengals want to have aspirations that we think that they should have with Joe Burrow, then they're going to have to beat good teams. I'm just looking at the realistic nature of, you win this game against Jacksonville, you give yourself a little bit of leeway to have a bad game against Detroit at home, or going to Minnesota, who won 14 games last year, and that's going to be a tough game.
No, they all count, right? I mean, that's the beauty of the beast. They all count. I mean, it's not like if you go and you get blown out by the Packers by 40 points, which I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, by the way, to be clear. But if that were to happen, obviously there's a sour taste in your mouth. But like you said, you win a field goal game against the Jaguars versus losing a field goal game versus the Jaguars. Well, it's a completely different scenario on how you have an outlook for the season moving forward. The good news is you keep bringing up these next 4 or 5 games. After that, though, you got the Jets, you got the Bears, you got a bye week, you got Pittsburgh, and then you got the Patriots. So, it's then you got a little bit of a tough stretch after that, I get. But,
Right.
Hey, how many wins does it take to get the postseason? 9, 10 wins?
10. 9 hasn't gotten the last 2 years.
So 10, let's just call it 10 wins. You start 2-0. That gives you a pretty good chance moving forward. And as
the last 3 games are Dolphins, Cardinals, Browns. So you got to think
you already stole a game. I mean, that's the beautiful thing.
So
you already stole a game. You stole a game in Cleveland on the road. That you, when you look back at the end of the year, you ask yourself, which games you might have gone either way. You already won one of those.
Yeah, no, that's the good part. When I'm, I think I've.
Why are you so pessimistic on this 2-4 stuff? Why you keep doing
I'm
that?
always the optimistic guy, but for some reason I can't shake pessimism this year.
Did you watch that they got 7 yards of total offense in the second half of the football
Well,
game?
that's where if you want to be optimistic, we asked ourselves last year, you lose to the Ravens the 2 ways that they did last year, and they lose, I think, 4 games where they scored 35-plus points, and you're just sitting there wondering, man, why can't a thing break our way? Why can't something happen for the Cincinnati Bengals? And if one extra thing broke our way, obviously the Cowboys game broke our way last year, but if we had one extra game break our way, we're in the postseason, and God knows what would have happened if the Bengals make the postseason. This year, we've already gotten one of those games. We've asked ourselves, why can't we be lucky? Why can't we get one of those one time? And hey, we're in week 1. We get a game that we got outgained by 250 yards, I believe, by the Cleveland Browns and Joe Flacco and a core of rookies that you've never heard of. And you won the game. Yeah, it took a couple missed field goals, a missed PAT. Yeah, it took 2 drop passes for them to convert on a first down. Yeah, it took even 2 more drop passes that turned into interceptions. So you got about as lucky as you could get, but you walk away with a win. And if you want to be optimistic, that's what happens in sports. Things come, things go. You win games, you lose games. The fumble falls your way, the fumble falls their way sometimes, and one weekend they've already got a win.
Well, I think the most important thing in the NFL, if you have a team that you think is a good enough team to make the postseason, I think that the most important thing out of all of it, you can go week by week and sit here and act like maybe it's how well you're playing, how good you look, this, that, and the next. I think by far the most critical thing is if you stay healthy. So if you're capable of staying healthy, you can keep your key players on the field. Pretty much for the entirety of the season. Obviously, there's always a chance that someone gets banged up here and there. They're questionable and they don't play one week. That's obvious. But you head into the postseason with your core players that you feel good about. They're relatively not too banged up. That is the most important thing by far. In fact, there are times where I would argue that even if you do have a couple core players that kind of go down with injury, and they have 4 or 5 weeks that they take off and they have to get healthy for something, and they are healthy heading into the postseason, that sometimes could even bode more well for you versus having some guys that have been out there for all 17 weeks. So, yeah, I don't know. If I was a betting man, which some say I used to be, I would be willing to
Don't bet anymore?
I kind of retired. I don't know why. I just randomly did. Kind of cold turkey did. It was like I don't have a reason to stop. I think it was a time thing, to be honest with you. I know that sounds goofy, but I just don't have time to do it anymore. Is that crazy to say?
When it first became legal here in Ohio, it did take up a lot of our time. We spent a lot of time talking about bets and everything like that. And now it's just, if you do throw one in, it's more of a spur of the moment thing. Like, I'm gonna watch this game, I'll throw some money. Right.
That's the amount of not that it was a lot of research, but it was just trying to keep up with the old percentages kind of took a toll over time. So